Okay, I hope I'm audible to all the students who are attending the lecture today. We continue with general equilibrium analysis, which we had started last time. So if you all recall, last time we had done the concept of Pareto efficiency. Okay, an allocation is said to be Pareto efficient if you cannot make one agent better off without making the other agent worse off. Okay, now today we start with another concept in general equilibrium. We start with another concept in general equilibrium known as market rate. This is a new concept. Okay, so now in this particular topic, we will actually see as to what both the agents will actually consume. So now budget lines will also come into picture. In the Pareto efficiency topic, we were looking at the point where they will stop trading with each other. We did not talk about the point they will actually consume. We talked about the point where they will stop trading with each other. But in this particular topic, we will see what the agents will actually consume or what will be their demanded bundles. Okay, so let's first of all revisit buying and selling. In buying and selling chapter, which we had done in semester 3 of micro, we had talked about the concept of net demand and gross demand. Okay, so let us understand the terminology first. Okay, there are two agents A and B. So for agent A, the gross demand vector for agent A is x1a comma x2a. This is the bundle agent A will actually consume. Okay, whereas if I find the net demand for agent A will be the gross demand vector minus agent A's endowment vector. So this will be x1a minus omega 1a comma x2a minus omega 2a. This will be the net demand vector for agent A. Okay, then I am defining something. Look onto your screens. We are defining the concept of excess demand for good one. Now excess demand for good one by agent A, excess demand for good one by agent A, which we denote by E1A, is nothing but x1a minus omega 1a. So this x1a minus omega 1a is nothing but the excess demand for good one by agent A. Okay, and the next terminology, excess demand for good 2 by agent A. Now this will be E2A, which will be x2a minus omega 2a. So let us again revise these terminologies once again. To understand the concept of market trade, we need to first introduce and understand these terminologies. Remember, there were two agents A and B, and from the buying and selling chapter, which you have done in micro semester 3, if I talk about agent A, his gross demand is what he actually consumes, x1a comma x2a. His net demand is the difference between his gross demand and his endowment. if I take the difference of these two vectors, what do I get? x1a minus omega 1a, comma x2a minus omega 2. Now, what is the excess demand for good one by agent A? Excess demand for good one by agent A is the amount agent A consumes over and above his endowment. So x1a minus omega 1a. And excess demand for good B, good 2 by agent A. Excess demand for good 2 by agent A is the amount consumed by agent A of good 2 over and above his endowment. So x2a minus omega 2a. Okay, so till here, so far, I hope it is clear to all the students who are attending the lecture today. Okay, so we can now do the same analysis for agent B. So let me erase the relevant portions. I can do the same analysis for agent B. The only difference is instead of A, I can write B. So excess for agent B's gross demand will be x1b comma x2b. Agent B's net demand will be the difference between the gross demand and agent B's endowment, which will be x1b minus omega 1b comma x2b minus omega 2b. Okay, now excess demand for good 1 by agent B will denote by E1b, which is x1b minus omega 1b, and excess demand for good 2 by agent B will be E2b, which is x2b minus omega 2b. So I hope that all students have understood the terminologies for agent A and agent B. Now, we are talking about market trade. So let us now introduce the equilibrium price. So now, at the equilibrium price, P1 star, market for good one is in equilibrium. Market for good one is in equilibrium. When I say market for good one is in equilibrium, it means what? It means demand for good one is equal to supply of good one. Correct? The equilibrium happens only when demand is equal to supply. Now, very important thing to understand, if at the equilibrium price P1 star, there is excess demand for good one by agent A. If at the equilibrium price P1 star, there is excess demand for good one by agent A, then for the market to be in equilibrium at the same price P1 star, who should supply good one to agent A? If agent A is the demander of good one, net demander of good one, then who should be the one to supply it? Agent. Who should be the one to supply it? Agent B. It is like saying, we have said that market for good one is in equilibrium. Market for good one is in equilibrium means demand for good one is equal to supply of good one. अब आप इसको इस तरीके से समझें, अगर गुड वन की मार्केट के अंदर ए की एक्सेस डिमांड है, तो उस एक्सेस डिमांड को कौन मीट करेगा? एजेंट बी मीट करेगा. तो अगर इवन ए इज पॉजिटिव, which means there is excess demand for good one by agent A, then to meet that excess demand, who should supply that? Agent B. So even B has to be negative. Always remember, even positive means excess demand, but even negative will mean excess supply. Now, if at the prices P1 star, A is the one who is demanding excess of good one, then for the market to be in equilibrium, who should supply it? Agent B. And since agent B is a net supplier of good one, it means even B is negative. That is why I have taken a negative sign here. I hope this particular concept is clear to all the students. So I can write, therefore, E1 star into E1A is equal to minus P1 star into E1B, or I can write P1 star into E1A plus P1 star into E1B is equal to 0, or I can take P1 star common, E1A plus E1B is equal to 0. Now I'm defining another term. Define Z1 as the aggregate excess demand. Define Z1 as the aggregate excess demand for good one. Let Z1 denote the aggregate excess demand for good one. So therefore, Z1 is nothing but E1A plus E1B. Therefore, I can write P1 star into Z1 is equal to 0. Okay, so if I again explain the whole analysis to you, at the equilibrium price P1 star, market for good one is in equilibrium. Market for good one is in equilibrium means demand for good one is equal to supply of good one. That means suppose at the equilibrium price P1 star, agent A is a net buyer of good one. Then who is the net supplier of good one? If agent A is the net buyer of good one, then who has to be the net supplier of good one? Agent B. So if even A is positive, then for the equilibrium to happen, even B has to be negative. Because we are assuming there are only two agents in the economy, A and B. There is no other agent in the economy. The economy consists of only two agents. So if agent A is a net buyer or a net demander of good one, then who has to supply that to agent A? Agent B. So if even A is positive, then even B is negative. So I can write P1 star into E1A is equal to minus P1 star into E1B. So I can take everything to the left hand side. P1 star into E1A plus P1 star into E1B is equal to 0. I can take P1 star common. Inside the brackets, I have E1A plus E1B. So P1 star into E1A plus E1B is equal to 0. Now we define Z1 as the aggregate excess demand for good one. Aggregate excess demand for good one means excess demand for good one by agent A plus excess demand for good one by agent B. So I can write equation star, I can write like this, P1 star into Z1 is equal to 0. I hope all students are clear with this. Okay, now the same analysis I can also do for good 2. So now at the equilibrium price, now at the equilibrium price P2 star, market for good 2 is in equilibrium. Market for good 2 is in equilibrium means what? Demand for good 2, demand for good 2 is equal to supply of good 2. Now again, let's do the same analysis. Suppose at the equilibrium price P2 star, agent A is a net buyer of good 2. That means agent A has excess demand for good 2. Then at the same price P2 star, who will be the one who will be supplying that good to agent A. If agent A has net demand for good 2, who will be supplying that to agent A? Agent B. So minus E to B. It's the same logic which we had done for good 1. If agent A has excess demand for good 2, it has to be matched by excess supply from agent B. That is why E to B has taken a negative sign. I hope all students are clear with this. So I can do a similar analysis. Therefore, P2 star into E2A is equal to minus P2 star into E2B. I can bring everything to the left hand side. Therefore, P2 star into E2A plus P2 star into E2B is equal to 0. I can again take P2 star common. That makes it E2A plus E2B is equal to 0. Now again I define Z2 as the aggregate excess demand for good 2. Z2 denotes the aggregate excess demand for good 2, which is my E2A plus E2B. Therefore, my equation star dash now becomes P2 star into Z2 is equal to 0. This is my equation 2. Okay, so we have done a similar analysis for good 2 market, and I hope all students are clear with this. So if I now see, now from equation 1 and 2, what do we get? P1 star into Z1 is equal to 0 and P2 star into Z2 is equal to 0. What does this mean? This means that at the equilibrium prices, P1 star and P2 star, markets for both good 1 and 2, markets for both good 1 and 2 are in equilibrium. This means that there is no excess demand, for good 1 and 2 at the equilibrium prices P1 star and P2 star. This is how we interpret these two equations. At the equilibrium prices P1 star and P2 star, there is no excess demand for good 1 and good 2. That is why P1 star into Z1 is 0. That means there is no excess demand for good 1 at the price P1 star, and P2 star Z2 equal to 0 means there is no excess demand for good 2 at the equilibrium price P2 star. Now we can draw an Edgeworth box. So let's look at the diagram. We represent this whole thing in the form of a diagram. So all of you can see the diagram I am drawing on the screen, and I hope all of you remember now how to draw the Edgeworth box. Origin of agent A, origin of agent B. Okay. Now we are doing the concept of market trade. Now we have the budget line. Okay. So look at the budget line I am drawing. Suppose this is my endowment. This is how much? This is omega 1A, endowment of good 1 with agent A. This is omega 1B, endowment of, sorry, this is omega 2a. This is omega 2a, endowment of good 2 with agent A. This is omega 1b, endowment of good 1 with agent B. And this is omega 2b, which is endowment of good 2 with agent B. Now, from the buying and selling chapter of semester 3 micro, you must have learned that endowment always lies on the budget line, because the endowment bundle is always affordable. So the endowment bundle lies on the budget line. I can draw a budget line like this. This is my budget line. Let me mark this as EF. So EF is the budget line, and now understand this. EF is the budget line for both agents A and B. EF is the budget line for both agents A and B. Why is EF the budget line for both the agents A and B? Because there are two reasons. First reason is that if you look at the endowment point omega, the endowment point omega in the Edgeworth box, is the same for both agents A and B. The endowment point omega in the Edgeworth box is same for both the agents A and B. It means this point represents the endowment for A also, and this point in the Edgeworth box represents the endowment for agent B also. Second thing is, both agents face the same set of prices. Both the agents face the same set of prices, P1 and P2. That means slope of the budget line for agent A is minus P1 by P2, and slope of the budget line for agent B is also minus P1 by P2. Now guys, try to understand this. For both A and B, the point is common, omega. For both agents A and B, the slope is also common. So if both agents A and B are facing the same slope of the budget line, and both their budget lines should pass through the endowment omega, when is that possible? That is possible only when both of them have the same budget line. It is possible. See, there are two conditions. One is agents A and B should have the budget line passing through omega, and agents A and B should have a budget line with the same slope. Now, what is the line passing through a point with the same slope? The line itself. You can't have another line. That means both agents A and B have the same budget line. Now, another thing you must have seen, I have taken a point E here. Now, if I stretch it above, this means even though this point is affordable to agent A, but this point is not available. If you look at the Edgeworth box, agent A's origin I can further stretch. See, I'm stretching it upwards. Okay, I can erase the initial part now. This part all of us know. Let me erase this part and explain this concept to you. All of you focus on the Edgeworth box I have drawn. Now you can look at the point. See, I can stretch it above. This is my A's vertical axis. I've stretched it above, and I've drawn dotted lines, you can see. Now this point, even though A can afford this much, but this point is not available in the economy. So this part of the budget line is imaginary. It does not exist. because amount of good one available in the economy is constrained by this point. Even though A can afford this if I further stretch the budget line, but this point is not available. This point is not available in the economy. Not available in the economy, even though agent A can afford this point. Even though agent A can afford this point. Okay, so this was another concept. I hope it's clear to everyone. So now let's move forward. So till now what we have done, we have located the endowment point and we have drawn the budget line EF, and we are saying that EF is the budget line for both agents A and B. Why? Because EF has the same slope minus P1 by P2 and it passes through the same point omega. Now suppose agent A is consuming at this point. So this is agent A's indifference curve. This is my ICA and this is agent A's equilibrium EA. And suppose agent B is consuming at this point. So this is agent B's indifference curve. This is agent B's indifference curve, which is ICB, and this is my point EB. All of you can see on your screen, I have located points EA and EB, and the term I've used is suppose. Will they actually do it or not? I am not commenting on it right now. I am saying suppose. Okay, this is my point EB. So EA is the point where ICA is tangent to the budget line EF. EB is the point where ICB is tangent to the budget line EF. Okay, so what do we see from the diagram if I do an analysis? So I can erase all this off now because we know all this. Let us now analyze the diagram. Let us now analyze the diagram. So look at the observations from the diagram. All of us can see, if I talk about agent A, so agent A is a net buyer or a net seller of good one. You can see agent A is consuming this much. Now I can also erase this dotted line because you all are familiar with it. We don't need the dotted line now. Okay, you can see this is agent A's endowment, but how much is agent A consuming of good one? This much. So agent A is consuming less than his endowment. So agent A is a net seller. Agent A is a net seller of which good? Good one. Agent A is a net seller of good one. Okay. If you look at agent B, abhi we are talking only about good one. Okay. So if you look at agent B, how much is agent B's endowment of good one? This much is agent B's endowment of good one. But how much is agent B consuming of good one? EB, you can stretch it to the B's axis. So this is my X1B. So agent B is consuming, if you look at agent B is a net buyer of good one. Why is agent A a net seller of good one? Since X1A is less than omega 1A and agent B is a net buyer of good 1 since X1B is more than omega 1B. Now, guys, if I define Z1, what is Z1? If you recall, Z1 is the aggregate excess demand for good 1. So Z1 is nothing but E1A plus E1B. E1A is X1A minus omega 1A plus E1B is X1B minus omega 1B. Recall Z1 is the aggregate excess demand for good 1, which is excess demand for good 1 by agent A plus excess demand for good 1 by agent B. Now, if you look onto the diagram, X1A minus omega 1A sign is negative because X1A is less than omega 1A, and X1B minus omega 1B sign is positive because X1B is more than omega 1. But you would be surprised if you look at the diagram, you will see that this is negative by this much, but it's positive only by this tiny amount. It means I can say that the negative dominates the positive. The negative dominates the positive. You can see in the diagram the negative term is by this much amount, but the positive term is only by this tiny amount. So the negative dominates the positive. Therefore, I can say, therefore my whole Z1 is negative. And when I say that Z1 is negative, what does this mean? This means, so when I say that Z1 is negative, this means that there is excess supply of good 1. Z1 positive means there is excess demand for good 1, but Z1 negative will mean the reverse. Z1 negative will mean there is excess supply of good 1. So this is my first observation. Now, if I look at the second observation, which you can see on the right hand side of your screen, this is observation 2. If I talk about agent A, and now if I talk about good 2, what is agent A's endowment of good 2? This much. But how much is agent A consuming of good 2? This much. So this is my X2A. So I can say agent A is a net buyer. Agent A is a net buyer of good 1 since, sorry, good 2. Agent A is a net buyer of good 2 since X2A is more than omega 2A. And if I talk about agent B, what will agent B be? Now agent B's endowment of good 2 is this much. But how much is agent B consuming of good 2? EB, you can stretch it to the B's vertical axis. This is X2B. You can see agent B is a net seller of good 2. Why? Since agent B is consuming less than her endowment of good 2. Okay, so now I can define Z2. What is Z2? Aggregate excess demand for good 2. It will be equal to E2A plus E2B. Now, what is my E2A? E2A is X2A minus omega 2A plus E2B will be X2B minus omega 2B. Okay. Now, if you again look onto the diagram, X2A minus omega 2A is positive. X2B minus omega 2B is negative. If you look at it from A's origin, X2A minus omega 2A is positive. If you look at it from B's origin, X2B minus omega 2B is coming out to be a negative term. But you will be seeing that the positive is dominating the negative. So in this case, you can see that the positive term dominates the negative term. It is positive by this much, but it's negative only by this tiny amount. So I can say, therefore, my Z2 is positive, and this means that there is excess demand for good 2. Z2 positive means there is excess demand for good 2. So I hope till here all students are clear. So I can quickly erase all this, okay, and I can show it to you what we have learned up till now. So till now we had this diagram. I am again revising it. This was my diagram. This was origin of agent A, origin of agent B. This was my budget line EF. Slope of this budget line minus P1 by P2. This is my endowment point omega. Okay. This is my omega 1A, omega 2A. This is my omega 1B. This is my omega 2B. Okay. Agent A is consuming somewhere here. Agent A is in difference curve. ICA. This is the point EA. And agent B is in difference curve from B's origin. This is ICB. And this is my point EB. Okay. And what have we found out? We have found out, first thing we have found out till now is that Z1 is negative, which implies there is excess supply of good 1. And the second thing we have found out from our analysis is that Z2 is positive, which means there is excess demand of good 1. Good 2, sorry. There is excess demand of good 2. Now I ask you, whenever there is excess supply of a good, it causes the equilibrium price to fall. Excess supply creates competition among the producers and they start bidding down the price. And whenever there is excess demand, it causes the price to rise. Whenever there is excess demand, it will cause the price to rise. So excess supply of good 1 will cause P1 to fall. Excess demand of good 2 will cause P2 to rise. What will happen to the slope of the budget line? Slope of the budget line is minus P1 by P2. Now what is happening to P1? P1 is falling. But what is happening to P2? P2 is rising. So therefore, if I talk about the slope, my numerator is falling and my denominator is rising, which causes the slope to fall. Therefore, the budget line will now become flatter. Our budget line will now become flatter. So my budget line will no longer be EF. my budget line will now be more flatter. So I can draw another budget line. So I'm erasing all these points now. My budget line, instead of being EF, now it will become more flatter like this. This will be E dash F dash. Now EF will no longer be the budget line. Now my budget line will become flatter than before to E dash F dash. And on the budget line, now on the budget line E dash F dash, where will agent A consume? Agent A will consume where MRS of A is equal to the slope of the budget line minus P1 by P2. And where will agent B consume? Where MRS of B is equal to the slope of the budget line, which is again minus P1 by P2. Or I can say P1 dash by P2 dash because prices have changed. So agent A will consume where MRS of A is equal to minus P1 dash by P2 dash. Agent B will consume where MRS of B is equal to minus P1 dash by P2 dash. So what do we learn from these two equations? These two equations imply, what do they imply? These two equations imply that MRS A is equal to MRS B is equal to minus P1 dash by P2 dash. So that means my point of market equilibrium will be, this will be A's indifference curve tangent to the budget line. B's indifference curve will be tangent to the budget line also, and it will be tangent to A's IC also. This will be B's indifference curve. This will be ICB. And this point will be called the point of market equilibrium. This point will be called the point of market equilibrium, or this was given by Walras, so it's called Walrasian equilibrium. This point E will be called the point of market equilibrium or Walrasian equilibrium. You can see at this point E, the indifference curves are tangent to each other and they are tangent to the budget line also. So remember initially when I said suppose, that suppose will never happen. That suppose case will never happen. I actually started with the wrong thing to arrive at the right thing. It means if you look at the diagram, this case will never happen. The case which I had taken initially, which was that case? This case was A was consuming here. So what was my budget line? If you remember, initially my budget line was this EF, if you remember. And A was consuming here and B was consuming somewhere here, if you remember. This was EA and this was EB. You will see this will never happen. What will happen? Both the ICs will be tangent to each other and they will be tangent to the budget line also. I deliberately took something which is not possible to arrive at what will be the result. So this will not be the case. That is why if you remember initially in the lecture, I had used the word suppose. It was just used to show you that suppose this case happens, what will it lead to? This will lead to excess supply of good one and excess demand of good two, which in turn will cause the prices to change in such a way so that the budget line shifts from EF to finally from EF to E dash F dash. Budget line shifts from EF to E dash F dash. Okay, the new budget line will still pass through the endowment. The new budget line E dash F dash will still pass through the endowment. Endowment is still affordable. And on this new budget line, both ICs will eventually become tangent to each other. This is ICA and this is ICB. Both ICs will eventually become tangent to each other. This will be the point of market equilibrium or Walrasian equilibrium. Okay, so this is my condition of market equilibrium. This is my condition of market equilibrium. This condition simply states that both the ICs should be tangent to each other. That means MRS of A is equal to MRS of B, and both the ICs should be tangent to the budget line also. That means MRS A and MRS B both should be equal to the slope of the budget line minus P1 dash by P2 dash. So this was the concept of market equilibrium. So very important to understand. There are some things which are very important to understand. Okay, first of all, you should not confuse with the concept of Pareto efficiency and market trade. So the two concepts are completely different. Pareto efficiency is completely different from market trade. Pareto efficiency, Walrasian equilibrium, also called market equilibrium. In Pareto efficiency, a point, or I can say an allocation is said to be Pareto efficient if one individual cannot be made better off, without making the other individual worse off. That means, if you remember, all gains from trade have been exhausted. You cannot make one individual better off without making another individual worse off. So an allocation is said to be Pareto efficient if no individual can be made better off without making the other individual worse off. Walrasian equilibrium is the point of market equilibrium. It is the point of market equilibrium where both the agents A and B will actually consume. Pareto efficiency talks about trade. When will they stop trading? Walrasian equilibrium is that point where both the agents will actually consume. To study the concept of Pareto efficiency, we do not need the budget line. Because we do not talk about consumption. We only talk about trade. But in Walrasian equilibrium, we need the budget line because we are finding out what bundles A and B will actually consume. We are finding out what bundles A and B will actually consume. So I hope all the students have understood in this lecture the concept of Walrasian equilibrium. By the way, when we have done this concept of Walrasian equilibrium, we have assumed perfect competition. There is perfect competition in the market for good 1 and good 2. It means there is perfect competition in the market for good 1 and good 2. Prices are fixed by the industry, and agents A and B will take those prices as given. Okay, so I hope all students are able to clear off the difference between Pareto efficiency and Walrasian equilibrium. Pareto efficiency talks about that point where the agents will trade, and once they reach that point, they'll stop trading. Walrasian equilibrium or market equilibrium will talk about a point which the agents will actually consume given their budget lines. So I stop here for the lecture. I hope all students have enjoyed the lecture. Any doubts, feel free to unmute your mic and ask, or you can give me a call, or you can mail me at divineschooloфeconomics@gmail.com. Okay, this is where I stop for the lecture today.